Today's topic, using an HSA to supercharge your wealth. The HSA, the health savings account, one of the most powerful and most underutilized accounts in all of personal finance. Heck, it could be one of the most powerful tools in your financial toolbox, but it's misunderstood and not optimized. And there's 4 easy ways to optimize it, and you probably guessed it. We're going to walk through all 4 of them together. So stay tuned. Those are all coming up next. All right, first up, let's just give a little HSA introduction. So if the term HSA is new to you or it's the first year you're using an HSA, again, HSA stands for a health savings account. The HSA is a very powerful tool in many facets, but here's why we love it the most. And this is the one you see most commonly when you look up the benefits of the HSA, but it's one of the very few accounts out there that offer what we call a triple tax benefit. And what does that mean? Well, it means that when you put money into it, there is a tax deduction. When the funds are in there, it's tax deferred, meaning you're not getting any 1099s throughout the year, right? It's sitting in there, you're getting tax deferred growth. When you pull it out for qualified medical expenses, we call these QMEs, completely tax-free. That's where it has this triple tax advantage. Now, we're going to get into some more specific as we move on here, but one of the big things in there is you got to make sure you have a high deductible health plan. And this is key, right? Don't go for a health plan because you think the HSA is cool. Go for the health plan that fits your needs and your family's needs. And if by chance it is a high deductible health plan that is HSA eligible, fantastic. We get to take advantage of it. But I always like to point this out because some years you might not want to use the high deductible health plan. And I always think about our family as an example, right? You know, a year with a kid, no kid, year with a kid, no kid, year with a kid. Ideally, if we could have nailed it perfectly, you know, every single year that we were having a kid, maybe we had a little bit better health plan and we weren't worried about the high deductible plan. You know, life kind of throws curveballs and maybe you can't time it perfectly, right? But regardless, you get to pick a new health plan every single year. So you can really customize this thing. And the years that you do have that HSA eligible high deductible health plan, fantastic. Take advantage of it because it has that triple tax benefit to it. So the HSA, one of the neatest tools out there. A lot of ways to utilize it. We're going to cover that coming up next, but I at least wanted to give a quick little intro if the term HSA, the health savings account, is new to you. But now let's get into the main core here. Let's hit some of these major benefits and things to take advantage of to really supercharge your wealth. The first thing you need to do to supercharge your wealth with that HSA is invest the funds. Now, a few years ago, this wasn't all that common. A lot of the HSA custodians did not have the investment platforms in them. Today, it's almost hard to find one that doesn't include that. Whether it's, you know, the HSA banks, the Fidelities, these larger providers now have a full, really nice investment lineup inside of it. And you're probably thinking, well, why would I invest the funds? I need to use them for medical costs. And that's what we're going to get to. Let me see here. That is actually number 2. That's coming up next. But let's just go with the simplicity of you're going to put money into the HSA and you're going to invest it and you're not going to interrupt it. So you're going to give it some years to get some compounding growth going. Now, here's what I'm going to do for example. I'm going to take 2024 limits. If you're watching this in the future, just update the current limits, right? Do a little Google search to pull those up. Current limits are this. 8,300 for married. If you are single, it is cut in half. It's 4,150. I was going to say 25, but it's 4,150. I guess that would make sense when I use the term half, right? So here's where investing can be vital. I'm going to give you the difference between these two. And all I did was I said, okay, we're going to start with an $8,300 investment. We're going to invest that and we're going to get a return of 7%. I'm going to use just a fair number, nothing too high, nothing too low, but a fair 7% rate, assuming that we have a long time frame. I actually run this out for 30 years. So assuming that we're going to be maybe a little bit more stock tilted, right? That's where I'm going to use that 7%. But here's why getting invested is vital. And you may think, well, of course I'm going to invest and I'm watching this video. But we come across very smart individuals day in and day out where they put the money into the HSA and whether they forgot to invest it or they just kind of assume that once it's in there, it's invested, but it's not. So you got to make sure you get it invested. But here's why this is such a big difference. So over a 30-year time frame, if you only did the 8,300, so again, remember, this is the family side, total number, and I didn't increase it, these numbers go up a little bit every single year for inflation. I don't know what that's going to be in the future, let alone 30 years in the future. So I'm using that 8,300 every year. If you only did that every year and you got a 0% rate of return, and let's just say there was no fees, you never took $1 out, you're just shy of $250,000 30 years from now. Now keep all those same requirements, right? Same number, but this time you invested it. We didn't take anything out. There was no fees or anything being deducted per se. And you just had that 7% rate of return. And every single year you maxed it out. So a jump of, call it 590, an extra $590,000 because you invested it compared to let it sit in cash. And if I do the single side of that, the numbers turn out to be, if you only did straight contributions, about 125,000 compared to invested, not interrupted for 30 years, right around 420,000. So again, a net gain of $295,000. So this is why getting the funds invested in your HSA are vital. Now, again, if you're sitting there thinking, well, don't I have to use these funds? I'm going to get into that in number 2, but I at least wanted to show you the power of getting invested. And really what that is, that's the power of compounding interest, right? So number 1 way to supercharge your wealth with the fantastic HSA, get those funds invested. Number 2 on the supercharge list, I gave it away a little bit. Don't use the funds. Try not to utilize the funds for the HSA. Now, I'm going to put a caveat here. Life happens. I get it. So, for example, for our family, I always do keep a small amount in cash in our HSA. While we don't plan to use it and I try to pay every single thing out of pocket, I always like to have a little bit of cash there. Whether it's just peace of mind or just knowing that it's there, I like it. And we usually tell a lot of our clients to do that. Even some of the providers will actually force, $1,000 or $2,000 in cash. So you may want to keep some in cash, but in a perfect world, you try not to utilize the funds. So when you have medical bills come due, you pay those out of pocket. And I realize, depending on where you are watching this video, on your current balance sheet, your current income, your current life situation, that's going to be easier for some than others. But in a perfect world, you're investing the funds, you're making the contribution, you're investing the funds, and when medical bills come due, you do not touch this. You pay those out of pocket. And that is where you can really allow that compounded interest. Those are the largest numbers that I was just looking at and reading off to you on the power of that 7% growth uninterrupted. So that is the second way to supercharge this is don't utilize the funds inside of the HSA. Pay those expenses out of pocket when they would come due. But we understand life happens. So either keep some cash on hand, or if you do need to utilize it, it's okay. Life has course corrections. Pivot, get it fixed, add something else, tweak it here, tweak it there, you'll be okay. So number 2, try not to utilize the funds in the Number 3, one of my favorite statements, keep receipts. I always tell my kids this, right? When something goes wrong and they're mad at someone or something, I would say, just keep receipts. You don't have to get it now, get it later. So keeping receipts in the HSA world, vital, because here is one of the most unique things to that HSA. You could have receipts going back decades, but if you can show the medical expenses that were paid out of pocket, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, and you just want to go pull that out of your HSA, completely tax-free, completely penalty-free, you can. Now, we'll tell our clients, right? If you have larger medical expenses, scan the receipt, throw them in a file in your online system, or if you're old school still and using, the actual collapsible folders, throw them in a certain folder. I wouldn't do, the trip to CVS where you got NyQuil that one night, for, I don't even know what NyQuil costs these days, $7.50. I wouldn't go that small with it. Now, if you really want to, have at it. But I would say the bigger cost of things for our family, things that come to mind, having babies, that's expensive. When your 4-year-old falls off the monkey bar, shatters his elbow, needs pins in his arm, that's expensive. Things of that nature, right? Those things that are really expensive that you're paying out of pocket. But even, a couple $100 here or there. Put those away, store them somewhere, because there is no limit. It's not just expenses like in the last year or two. It could go back as long as you've had that expense sheet going. You can utilize that for the HSA. So keep receipts. Now, qualified medical expenses, QMEs, we'll put a link down in the show notes so that you can see some of these, but it's pretty broad range. One of my favorites, if it's medically necessary, put the pool in the backyard, baby. Jump in. Water's fine. If it's medically necessary, even a pool could qualify as a QME. I'll put the link in there. You can go through and see all the crazy things that qualify for that. But number 3 here is keep receipts, because if you need to get into it, you can. And if you're going to get into it, I certainly don't want you to pay the 20% penalty. You heard that right, 20% penalty. Wait, it gets better. It's also taxed as ordinary income. So again, our people, physicians, high income earners, say you're in the 30, 35% tax range, right? Plus a 20% penalty. You're looking at like 50% plus in penalties. So we do not want to utilize these funds for anything that do not qualify as QME. So number 3, we are keeping receipts. Number 4, surely last but not least, the age 65 rule. And this is one of the coolest names in finance. Some people call this the stealth IRA. Just picture like a stealth bomber shooting across the screen right now. But the stealth IRA is what we call the HSA after age 65. Why do you give it that cool name? Well, I didn't think of that name. I wish I did. But they give it that name because really after age 65, you can utilize the HSA for anything. That's right. Having a little bit later midlife crisis, go get the Ferrari. Got to get the beach house? Add it in. The reason why we call it the stealth is it's just tax ordinary income. So think about it. You put money into an account, got a tax deduction. While it was in there, you got tax deferred growth. You pulled it out, you paid ordinary income. What am I describing? You probably think it's an IRA. It's not. It's your HSA. After age 65, you can utilize it for anything. You still have to pay ordinary income tax on it, but you remove that 20% penalty. That's why we call it the stealth IRA. So after age 65, it really opens up on what you can utilize it for. So if you're watching this video and you're in that Medicare age, unfortunately, that's a hard stop on those HSA contributions. So just keep an eye on that. But after age 65, the coolest name out there, that stealth IRA, you really can open it up. So that's why if you can take advantage, because you got to follow the rules, right? You got to be in a high deductible health plan that's HSA eligible. And if you're wondering why do I always say a high deductible health plan that's HSA eligible, I thought all high deductible health plans are. Usually, yes. The problem is if you buy a plan from the exchange, some of those are not HSA eligible because they don't know what your credits were. They didn't know what type of credit you were getting that. So just keep that in mind. If you're ever confused, just double check with HR, double check with healthcare.gov and just see. But usually in your documentation, we'll say HSA eligible, make it simple for you. But the last one on the list on supercharging your wealth with this HSA, the age 65 stealth IRA rule. And there you have it. 4 ways to supercharge your wealth by utilizing the HSA. From investing the funds to not using the funds in terms of paying out of pocket, to keeping receipts in case you do need to take a lump sum out, to the old age 65 stealth IRA rule. But 4 ways to really optimize that HSA. And I will say it in a lot of these videos, if you've seen other videos where I would say this is just a very powerful underutilized tool. And the reason why it's mostly underutilized is just because if you're not in a high deductible health plan, it's kind of your kick out, right? You can't even utilize it. But remember, it might not be an every year thing. You know, if you can hit a stretch where you're getting money in there, fantastic. But it kind of moves around. HSA plans, high deductible plans that are HSA eligible continue to become more and more common. So I hope you learned a cool tip or trick here. If you can, take advantage of the HSA, supercharge your wealth. As always, thanks for hanging out with me for the last 15 minutes or so. If you have not subscribed, subscribe to the channel. Click on the bell icon. You also get a notification every time we release one of our now weekly videos. Drop us a comment, anything you want to see, any questions you've always wanted to ask a CFP. Anything that's bothering you in your financial life, drop us a note. We'd love to make a video about it. Hopefully we can get that featured here in one of our next clips. As always, thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next video.